the Republicans have not reacted with overwhelming support for what the president's proposed so far. Two things. One, does that surprise you? And B, as Rahm Emanuel would say, what do you see at any glimmer of hope from the Republican response to what the president said?
Well, I wasn't surprised. I think that's a fair description that meager was the response. I don't anticipate in any area except maybe trade that the Republicans would come forward and either embrace or even agree to a lot of what the president was proposing. I think that with the president's outlining these ideas, the goal is in some sense to turn the tables back on the Republicans, that Republicans are putting forward a series of bills now that they're in control, and that they're daring the president to veto those bills and say, we're for this, show the world that you're against it. Now I think it's the president's turn to say, well, this is what I'm for, so show the world you're against that. And I do think that it's not going to be that comfortable for a lot of the Republicans that are in swing districts, because a lot of what the president's saying does make a lot of sense.
Austan, given that your sober-minded assessment is that almost nothing apart from trade, which Republicans love, is likely to get done out of none of these proposals likely to be adopted, do you see this as a purely political exercise? Trying to put Republicans in the position of being against popular things so that they're on record in that regard, making it harder for a Republican presidential candidate and easier for a Democratic presidential candidate in 2016?
You know, I think there's obviously some element of staking out what are positions, but I have historically put more weight on the importance of setting the agenda maybe than the premise of the question. I don't view that as a purely political exercise. I think like changing if we were to change this major loophole on evading capital gains taxes by the step-up basis at death, that'd be a major tax reform that would generate a lot of revenue that you could use for things that are important. And getting that on the agenda, I think, is worthwhile.
Al?
Austan, two questions. First, going to what you just said about capital gains, Republicans say this is class warfare, and that almost always backfires. And secondly, would you add infrastructure to trade, to things that might get done?
Well, you got two different ones. On infrastructure, I'd like to hope that they would, but you know, your read is a lot better than mine. I'm just the policy guy, but it does strike me that mostly the only places of common ground are on the barest of bones, maybe the highway bill or some smallish thing, rather than a major infrastructure program that the country could use. On capital gains, it's funny because the candidate Obama in 2007 gave a big tax address that was about, let's be for tax reform to strengthen the middle class, and if you had to raise capital gains up to the rate that it was under Ronald Reagan, would that really be so bad? I don't view that as class warfare. I mean, you've got some of these things that are just massive tax loopholes that both parties have known about for decades and haven't fixed.
Austan, in addition to being a policy guy, you're a brilliant mimic. Who's your favorite imitation these days? And do it for us.
Who's better? It's always Mr. Burns from The Simpsons.
All right, go ahead.
Excellent. Okay, wait a minute. This State of the Union is outrageous. Smithers, see to it that the president is removed from office.
That's
not bad, Austan. You know.
Wait, can you do, Austan? Can you do any of your former colleagues, anybody you worked with in the White House? Can you do them?
Not until they're out of office.
Really? All right, Gene Sperling, post office.
How about Larry?
Larry Summers, Gene Sperling. You do either of them?
No, they're hard to make fun of.
If you just, when it comes to Gene, if you just talk nonstop for the next hour, that would be pretty much.
Yeah, just start talking fast and keep going.
Austan, last question. What will the growth rate be in the first quarter of 2015?
I think it'll be something less than 3%, maybe like 2.8 for the first quarter of next year. And
of this year.
And the last quarter of this year, I'd say maybe we get to 3%, and then we slow down a bit going into the beginning of next quarter. I think overall growth is going to be solid, but not spectacular and not bad. And I think maybe people are getting a little far out ahead of themselves.